Good morning. My name is Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. And I explained to Bob I don't wear ties. This is a compromise. But if you wear something like this, a Roman collar, you're a walking Rorschach test. And people hate you or love you before they even know your name. It's kind of like wearing a hijab, or a yarmulke. So there. I've been in the rooms for a long time. I received the gift of sobriety in 1976. I was in school at the time, studying in Berkeley. And my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous was the recovery in the East Bay, Berkeley, Oakland, El Cerrito, which are not usually even on the map. Because there are other places that take more precedence. But it's where I got started to get back on my feet. And I am a member of the Jesuit order, Franciscans and Dominicans and Carmelites. There's all these different flavors within the Catholic Church. And if you don't like Catholics, you won't like Jesuits. So it's just easier. If you're a conspiracy person, the Masons run everything. Right? The Jews run the Masons, and the Jesuits run the Jews, just in case you're wondering. Save yourself a lot of time. So I get sober. I was 29 years old. I'm now 76, almost 77. And I had to relearn everything. I'm a high school teacher. Although I haven't been in a high school classroom since 1981, I'm still pretty much a high school teacher. I had family. There's alcoholism in the family. We had people who were politically crazy, and people who were religiously crazy, and people who were just crazy. And I've done a little bit of time, it sounds like a prison sentence. I've lived with Chinese people. Very different, ever so different. I've also lived with German people, ever so different. I mean, how do we even share the same planet? But one of the ways the Chinese understand things is through Confucius. And Confucius was writing commentaries on society and culture and politics ever so long ago. The Chinese were writing poetry when the Europeans were still chasing Vikings around, so. And one of the ways things go crazy in Chinese world is when things go out of balance. And it's easy to lose balance. And it's easy to fall over. I'm an older person, not a younger person. I am much more aware of balance. I'm much more aware of stairs. I'm much more aware of hand railings. And I find it very helpful to get help when I'm moving anywhere. Balance is a real thing. So is gravity. Even though it's invisible and it's you can't taste it, but it is in full effect 24 hours a day. And I can find chaos, out of balance, danger in lots of places. How to live surrounded by crazy people. That's what we do every day. Because so many of us are out of balance. So I'm going to share my reflections on this. I'm an AA member. I participate in that program of recovery. I have a sponsor. I sponsor some people. I also go to Al-Anon. because I did not want to be a sober person who was shooting people. And if you say that to AAs, they just look confused, you know. Who would you be shooting? And they don't know that in dark Al-Anon, the conversation is, do you shoot to kill or do you shoot to maim? And the room divides right down the middle. It's an ongoing discussion. I went at a convention and heard an Al-Anon person out of the Midwest talk, and just sensational. And she almost murdered her husband one night. I mean, it could happen. And he was drunk and he was offensive and he had passed out. And she'd been putting up with it for years, and she's a nurse. And then it occurred to her that a lot of alcoholics drowned in the bathtub. So she filled the bathtub and put him in and held him down until the bubbles stopped. And then it occurred to her that there's something wrong with this picture. And she pulled him out of the bathtub, gave him artificial respiration. She's a nurse. Nurses know things. And she dried him off and put his pajamas on him and put him to bed and blow-dried his hair. Now, Al-Anons laugh themselves sick over that because it's the whole cycle in one evening. Well, I just loved her. So I went back to Oakland, and we were having a day in Al-Anon on a very hot summer day in a wooden church. It was so hot and no air conditioning, and it was just brutal. I remember saying if it was 3 degrees hotter, I would not believe in God. And that's the only thing some people heard me say that day. God, it was hot. But we wanted to do some work, some groups where we could get together and talk about stuff that we usually don't talk about because we think it would make us crazier. So just pretend nothing's wrong. What could go wrong? And so we were going to have a talk about anger and violence, which is part of the story, right? And what will you entitle something like this? Well, a committee made decisions, and they're always a little flat because they don't want to offend anybody, especially the crazy people. And the decision for the that particular breakout session was entitled Murderous Thoughts. Neutral, balanced. The room was full. Because so many of us have those thoughts and feelings, but we don't know how to talk about them. Like at an AA meeting, if someone starts talking about the violent stuff, boy, people get anxious. Sergeant at arms, people at the door. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. I was at a meeting in Los Angeles ever so many years ago, and a guy pulled a gun at a meeting. And they just told him to sit down. You know. Oh, sit down. But in Al-Anon, if you talk about some of the violent stuff, they just nod their heads. Oh, yeah, we get it. Yeah, almost killed him. Oh, yeah, we get that. So the woman who shared the meeting was hilarious. She talked about real stuff, and she talked about her own feelings. She was married, and she had kids, and she had neighbors. I mean, all that stuff comes out. And people laughed until they cried. So the next year, we were going to have the same conversation, but we entitled it, What Would You Do with the Body? And I assure you there are people who find this in very poor taste, you know. And I finally met my Midwestern friend, And I asked her, what were you going to do with the body? And she said, first things first, kill the son bitch. Alcoholism is a world way out of balance. The two folks who spoke last night, I was very glad to hear them talking about the chaos that becomes so completely normal for us. Allergy of the body, obsession of the mind. I like that a lot, and I've got it. I could have gone into treatment senior year of high school, but that didn't happen. Chaos. Allergy of the body, obsession of the mind. Someone described it this way. Alcoholism is a lot like dancing with a gorilla. You're not done dancing until the gorilla is done dancing. And when they told the story, they did not say dancing with the gorilla. They said dating the gorilla. And they didn't say dating. But you get the picture. You are on the receiving end. Now, the gorilla kills a lot of us. It's just, if you love an alcoholic, there's a lot of heartache and disappointment and loss and shame. These are big topics in recovery world. Oh, everything's fine. I'll just get a new one. Well, you're not done dancing. You're not done dancing until the gorilla is done dancing. If you're clean and sober today, it means the gorilla has let go. If the gorilla has let go, get out of the cage. And don't go back into the cage, even when the gorilla starts humming your song, which it does, you know. You've been out of the cage for weeks, and the moon's full, and you're a little lonely, and the gorilla's wearing something cute, you know. And you say, well, maybe just this once. One of them, I don't know if Wally's here, but I've known Wally for 100 years. Wally told me once he doesn't want to dance with the gorilla, but every so often he wants to pet it just a little bit, you know. Cats. Heartache. Now, we who love alcoholics visit the zoo a lot. And you walk in and you see lions and tigers and bears. And you see giraffes. I'm very pro-giraffe myself. And then you go by the gorilla cage and you see the person you love with the gorilla. Might be your spouse. Lots of people marry alcoholics. I was involved doing a wedding, performing a wedding, witnessing a wedding. What's the right verb? And she'd been married a bunch. And this was her fifth husband. And the last four were drinking alcoholics, as was her father. And her present husband was a sober alcoholic. And with the wisdom of Solomon, I said, do you see a pattern here? And she said, no, because one was tall and one was short and one was fat and one was thin. One was a Methodist. You know, there's nothing in common here. Alcoholics. People get married to alcoholics. We're fun and we're cute for a short period of time. Might be your mom or dad. That's a different energy. My dad, functional alcoholic, his father, mother's side of the family, full of people just like us. Might be one of your folks. Might be one of your kids or grandkids. And when that happens, it changes the universe. You're the king of AA. Your spouse is presiding over many things. You're stable, you're confident, you have 12,000 sponsees. You're quoted. And then your oldest granddaughter overdoses. And they save her life, and your world changes. All kinds of people come into Al-Anon family groups. Though early Al-Anon was all women married to alcoholic men because we're so cute. Then adult children started coming in the 80s and 90s. The new group coming in are parents and grandparents. And they have a level of terror that not a lot of other people understand. I was at a gathering in Georgia. The American Association of Psychiatric something or other. And one of my friends was involved in putting it together. And a lot of therapists don't take care of themselves. You shouldn't be shocked by that. Because they're so busy taking care of other people. It's an Al-Anon issue. So I was invited to come and talk to all these people about basic Al-Anon 101 self-care. And so I gave a talk, and I've never been asked back. But we had a meeting, 12-step, because people are in different programs. So it was a 12-step meeting, and we sat around, about 20 of us, and just talked. And one of the guys there said he's an Al-Anon, and he hasn't heard from his youngest son in 4 years. He's out there on the street somewhere. And he's learned to talk to other parents about this craziness, because it will make you crazy. He's learned how to live with this unspeakable thing. A few more people shared. And then a lady was there, and she said, I haven't heard from my daughter in 2 years. Can I get your phone number? Because I need to talk to someone who understands exactly what I'm going through. You walk by the gorilla cage and you see the person you love dancing with the gorilla. And you want to do something. Take action. Something must be done. To rest is not to conquer. Let's solve this problem. So you get into the gorilla cage and you start vacuuming. That's very helpful. You sweep. You rearrange the furniture. You hang a nice picture of the Dalai Lama or Pope Francis or some nice Chinese poetry. All that helps. None of that helps. So then you make nice meals, vegan meals, tofu. Here, eat this. You'll be fine. That doesn't help. So then you decide to get between the gorilla and the person you love and separate them, and the gorilla turns on you and yanks your arms and legs off. One of the things that's true and not spoken of very much is that untreated Al-Anon crazy costs people their lives. Lives are shortened by 10, 15, 20 years just from the worry and the upset and the fear. Good heavens. So there's a program called Al-Anon. And a lot of the Al-Anon program comes down to stay out of the cage. Let's repeat that. Stay out of the cage. But I only want to sweep and vacuum. We know, and it makes the gorilla really mad. We're going to meet over by the giraffes and talk about our need to run other people's lives. It's very crazy. I went to the International Al-Anon convention in Baltimore 5 years ago. I wanted to go to the one in Albuquerque this past July. Bought a ticket, had a hotel, all those other things. I had an 11 o'clock flight. And at 7 in the morning, I got a text from United Airlines saying, "Your flight has been canceled. And there are no more flights today. And there's no more flights tomorrow. Let's try Saturday." And I had some tumult and upset and, oh man, what's wrong? And then I realized I'm going to be home that weekend, so I may as well enjoy myself. And I mentioned that at a meeting, and I said, so here I am. And one of our more spiritual members said, well, I guess God didn't want you to go to Albuquerque. And I said, I think you're mixing God up with United Airlines. They canceled 800 flights that day, you know. It wasn't about me. Oh, no, Tom can't go to Albuquerque. Let's cancel 800 flights. I just don't think like that. Plan B. Anyway, I went to the meeting in Baltimore, and there were some of those wonderful old-timers, and one of the women speaking said, in early Al-Anon, New Jersey, New York, they were coffee makers. They were cookie makers. They didn't know what else to do. And if you read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I recommend, you might notice that the chapter to wives is written by Bill Wilson. I think I'll repeat that. The chapter to wives is written by Bill Wilson. And the chapter basically comes down to this. Stand by your man. That's the chapter to wives. And it took a while for those of us who love alcoholics to realize that we have a deep craziness ourselves. And it has to be dealt with. What do we do with our rage, our disappointment, our control issues? For some of us in Al-Anon, control is heroin. If you just let me run everything, we'll get along fine, you know. Oh my. I like the serenity prayer a lot. And there's a singular version and a plural version and a longer version. And if you're a little cranky, you could get into an argument about any of those things. Try not to do that. It's not a sign of mental health if you're arguing about which form of the serenity prayer we should close with. Just saying. Singular, God grant me. Plural, God grant us. They're both in the literature. They're both just fine. I was in Texas. I was at a weekend with Men in Recovery. I was doing some talks. They had a meeting Saturday night. And one of the local folks was talking. I don't know him. I don't know a lot. But he was well known and respected. And very sane. I mean, very practical and useful. And I was so glad I was there for the talk. And he said, the serenity prayer is not about, oh God, calm me down. That's not the serenity prayer. Give me some serenity because I have to make decisions. You don't want to make decisions when you're crazy. You don't want to make decisions when you're cranky. You don't want to make decisions when you're exhausted. You don't want to make decisions when you're in heat. Those usually aren't helpful decisions. I love you. What's your name? Is a red flag. A red flag. Just saying. So this guy said, and again, I don't know his name. I heard it at a meeting. I don't know his name. He said, here are 3 things I cannot change. I cannot change the past. I cannot change the truth. And I cannot change you. That frees up the whole weekend. Can't change the past. Stuff happened, there are consequences. Stuff didn't happen, there are consequences. I don't want to live there. Still angry. Why do you hate them? We've always hated them. Really? You know? Can't change the past. Heartache. When we're doing a 4th step, lots of feelings can come up, sadness and anger and shame and remorse. But you don't want to live there. You take a look at it and move on. Don't live in the past. I loved the year 1958. Well, good for you. The rest of us have moved on. But you just hold on, you know. You're not crazy. Can't change the truth. The laws of physics. Let's just start with those. To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's the law. You're not exempt. I feel so lovely. I feel so happy. I feel so high. I feel so perfect. This will never change. False. 3 days later, you're thinking of hanging yourself. Why am I so low? You were so high, remember? To every action. What goes up comes down. That's another one that's just universally true. Also, 2 objects can't be in the same place at the same time. I need to remember that when I'm driving. This is 5, 10, 15 years ago. I was in 3 fender bender accidents. I caused every one because I thought 2 things could be in the same place at the same time. The truth. And I can't change you. Loving someone does not change them. Changes me. And hating someone does not change them. Changes me. An awful lot of that business about forgiveness and letting go and detachment is for my sake, not for their sake. Well, I can never forgive them because they're so disgusting. Really, you'll be miserable every day of your life. Congratulations. It's a wise choice. Hold on to that one, you know. I can never forgive them because I like hating people sometimes. There are some people, whenever I hear they're having a bad day, I feel very happy. This is not a sign of mental health. I just want you to know that. The Germans have a word for it. It's called Schadenfreude. It's to take delight in the misery of others, and I'm good at it. I want you to know. I asked someone years ago, he was in charge of stuff, and he had retired. And I said, so how are you doing? And his response was, my enemies are in disarray. I feel great. I understand that. The first step, the powerlessness and the unmanageability from sea to shining sea. So many things out of balance, so many things out of whack. When I began recovering, and I go into Al-Anon, I mean, as an adult child. But I'm also a teacher, a high school teacher, and a lot of us who are teachers, social workers, nurses, police officers, we really do need 100,000 Al-Anon meetings because we just are in the crisis all the time. We're so angry all the time. There's a meeting, an Al-Anon meeting I go to sometimes on the East Coast, And in that meeting is run by members of the United States Marine Corps who decided Al-Anon will help. Really? Because, we're called into crisis after crisis after crisis, and I am good at that. I'm responsive. I'm intuitive. If you're in trouble, I can smell it. Even if I don't know your name, I know you need help. And I have gotten in over my head over and over and over again because I was minding business that's not mine. And people I'm never going to see again. This is a painless story, a little embarrassing to me, but I was at the San Francisco airport, which is huge. It's big, like big airports, and I was lost. I was supposed to pick someone up, but I parked in the wrong place, and I was in the wrong area, and I'm late, and I'm a little panicky, and I need to pee, all those things. And there were two women, one older, one younger, mother-daughter, not speaking English. And they clearly were lost and confused. And I, who was lost and confused and needed to pee, said to them, "Can I help you?" Thank God no lives were lost. But the younger woman took the older woman by the hand and moved away. So that's the right decision. When I come into Al-Anon, again, exhaustion and rage are my things. And I was teaching high school kids act a lot like alcoholics. The reverse is true. A lot of alcoholics act like high school kids. And I mentioned that I taught 15-year-olds and I taught 18-year-olds, and it's blowing hot and cold and up and down and excitement all the time, and we need more excitement. It's really a good idea. I mentioned that to some other teachers in recovery, and one of the other teachers said, "I teach third graders, and a lot of alcoholics act like third graders, and a lot of third graders act like alcoholics, so it's across the board." What happens with so many of us is we come into recovery emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually very immature. Very young. We just didn't grow. We used booze to cope. We didn't work through things. We sedated it. Anyway, back to the Baltimore Al-Anon meeting. It took a while to realize how much care we need. And so when I started going to Al-Anon, here's what I first met. A meeting in Los Angeles at a church. 20, 25 women, 4 or 5 men. We sat in the back. The woman who was secretary had been secretary since Truman was president. Slight exaggeration. She also knew everything. And the way the meeting ran is they read from literature because they think they have to. And then if someone had a problem, they presented it to Her Majesty the Queen. And she would solve it. It was kind of like having Martha Stewart running a meeting, How can I make this right? And it was just amazing. Now, in her behalf, she was savvy and smart and knew a lot of things. But that's not Al-Anon. In Al-Anon, running other people's lives is the craziness, not the recovery. But I went to that meeting for a while. And then I dropped out, and then I went back, and then I dropped out, and then I went back again. Someone gave me a cassette tape of a woman named Blanche from West Texas. She was a teacher at Permian Basin High School. She taught English And it's one of those cassette tapes that I put in my car and I played over and over and over and over and over again. And here's a couple things she said. When she was growing up in northern Florida, she was told, what you don't know can't hurt you. And she said, listen, what I did not know about alcoholism almost killed 4 people. So part of recovery is finding out about the disease and finding out about the recovery. It's crucial. It's crucial. And if there's a new study that comes out, you want to know about it. She was also told, God helps those who help themselves. And she says, that's not true either. God helps those who ask. And I just want you to know that on a regular basis, I have to be reminded to ask, because it doesn't occur to me. Should. It doesn't. And I could be at the end of a really awful day, and not once have I asked God for help because I kept thinking I could sort it out myself. There are 100 examples of that. And then she said this, and it helped me ever so much. Because a lot of the Al-Anon stuff is like trying to grab smoke. What are you talking about? You know? There was a lady that went to Al-Anon and she thought the literature was pretty poor. And so she wrote her own. A manuscript, hundreds of pages long, how to solve everything. And she was good, like the lady running the meeting. She had a lot, and people will fly, oh please, let's call her and she'll solve it. You know, divide the child in half. Let's solve it. And then some Al-Anon recovery kicked in and she started giving less advice. And her book got thinner and thinner and thinner. And when I met her, she said, now I tell the people, I only have one piece of advice for the people I sponsor. And I said, what's that? She said, I tell them, call before you shoot. Now I started with that, you know. Shoot who? Call first. Can't change the past, can't change the truth, and I can't change you. What can I change? In this chaotic world, sorely troubled world, I can change my thinking, I can change my behavior, and I can change my attitudes. Changing my thinking means getting some new ideas, getting some information. Read the literature. Changing my behavior. This is slow work, especially if you're really out of balance. If you're someone that Confucius would write about, you know, very out of balance person. And in the 12 steps, we talk about our defects of characters, our flaws, our shortcomings, the things that are out of balance. And we ask a power greater than ourselves to help restore the balance. So I start having appropriate responses to things and friends rather than hostages, you know, friends rather than clients. I was 10 or 15 years sober and I looked around and I had no one my age, no peer who was a friend. I had people I could help and I had people who helped me. But who do you just hang out with? Well, God. You got to find some friends. You got to find a peer group. People you can just hang out with. People where you talk and they listen and they talk and you listen. This is 10 to 15 years of work and willingness to change. I love giving suggestions like those poor ladies in the airport that I almost killed with good advice. And sometimes I just have to keep my big fat mouth shut. There are so many things that are none of my business. I want to keep my sails out of other people's wind. I want to talk about 2 slogans, and then we can take a break for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then I want to talk about some ways we are crazy. And you know who you are. And that, by the way, is going to be doing something with some of the traditions, which are to help us not go crazy. You know? Act, don't react. Act, don't react. I'm a reactor. I'm reacting before I know I'm reacting. This was very true at home. We had some difficulties. I was the youngest. And I was the funny kid. And fun is a way of surviving. If you're a funny kid, you can survive. There are hero children who accomplish things and go to college and get many degrees, and they're the football champion and the cheerleading champion and the editor of the newspaper, and they get 3 Nobel Prizes. These are very hardworking people. I was talking with a priest who was getting his 3rd PhD, and I said to him, "So who was the alcoholic in your family?" And he said, "How'd you know?" And I said, anyone can get 1 doctorate. 2, suspicious, but 3, it's convincing. You need 100,000 Al-Anon meetings as fast as you can because you're trying to save the universe. All kinds of American political leaders are from alcoholic homes. Mr. Nixon's dad was a mean drunk. Mr. Reagan's dad was a mean drunk. Mr. Obama's father died of an overdose. This is in Texas, when Ann Richards was governor, she was a member of the program, and the lieutenant governor was also a member of the program, long years in Texas. And one of my friends said the whole state of Texas could join Al-Anon just because of our political leaders. Act, don't react. When someone comes at me with a lot of fear, I don't want to respond with fear. If someone comes at me with a lot of anger, I don't want to respond with anger. I want to be able to act rather than react. And that takes time and grace and good friends. One of the best things I've ever heard, and this is deep spiritual advice and spiritual practice. One of the ways of living in a world surrounded by crazy people is not to get too hungry, not to get too angry, not to get too lonely, and not to get too tired. Because then I'm not going to be in crisis mode immediately. And if I've slept well and I've been with some friends and I've eaten intelligently, I'm not going to be in trouble. Hold on now. Oh, and this is the last one before the break. One of the people I listen to sometimes is Sister Wendy. She's been on PBS and BBC, and she teaches art and she helps people look at paintings. And they asked her once, Sister Wendy, how do you know you're growing spiritually? And she says, are you any easier to live with? That's the test. Are you any easier to live with? And a lot of us aren't very easy to live with. And we'll talk about that in 15 minutes. Let's take a break.